Blog Talk Radio.
There's a mystery lurking the forested areas of the world. Many have seen something, but what is it? Are they seeing known animals? They claim they walk upright, like a human. There are so many eyewitnesses. Can they all be wrong? Is someone just playing a trick on people? Or is it possible a large bipedal being could exist in the forests of the world? You have a decision to make. Do you believe it exists? These are the topics we discuss on Sasquatch Watch Radio. Welcome everyone to another episode of Sasquatch Watch Radio. Today is October 15th, 2013. We've got a great show lined up for you tonight. Before we bring on our guest, I want to introduce my co-host as always, the Creature Seeker.
Hey Billy, how's it going?
It's going good here. How about you?
Well, I just watched the Red Sox eke out over the Detroit Tigers, so pretty happy about that.
Oh boy.
It was 1-0.
1-0.
Yeah.
You know, that's one thing I've never been able to watch is baseball. I don't know what it is. I just haven't been able to watch. Now, I can watch football, but baseball, for some reason, I've never been able to watch.
Well, I mean, compared to football or hockey or even basketball, Billy, baseball can be considered like a slower game.
Right.
You know? But, for me, like the rivalry is like the big thing, you know? I don't know. There's rivalries in the NBA and there's rivalries in hockey, but here in Beantown, there's the baseball rivalries are huge. So it's a matter of pride against some of the teams, especially like Boston Yankees, either Red Sox versus Yankees. I mean, that brings out the worst in people.
Oh,
but it's always fun to watch, you know?
Yep, that's kind of like a game with the Dallas Cowboys and the Redskins. Or I don't know, there's something about those two teams, too, that bring it out.
Yeah. But, Billy, how much longer are the Redskins going to be called the Redskins? Looks like there's this movement to change the name of the Redskins.
Well, a few people had a better idea. They said they should drop the embarrassing name of Washington.
That's a good one.
I think you're better off dropping that.
When I was a kid, the big rivalry was Steelers versus Dallas Cowboys.
Yep.
It was huge.
Yeah. Well, see, that's just it. I've got a son here at home that's a big Steelers fan. So every time a Steelers game comes on, he's got his Steeler gear on. And, they haven't been doing too hot this year. And I could say the same for the Redskins. Of course, they're not quite as bad off, but They're still not doing as good as they should be. So, that. Yeah, I think a lot of people had a lot of hopes in RG3, and I don't know. He just doesn't seem to be like he was last year.
Well, what can you do, Billy?
I know. Well, you watch it, and they still, they're still in it. So at least they've won some.
The thing is, Billy, some of these people take these sports like it's life and death. I mean, some people really. I like sports, but I'm not a fanatic. Like I don't go trash in someone's car just because they got a Yankee sticker.
Well, certain stickers on certain cars, I don't know. Not necessarily sports stickers.
Yeah.
You see a lot of them on, Toyota Priuses and stuff, but,
I know the ones you're talking about, Billy.
Oh, man. Anyway. So my understanding is you went all out and got us a really great guest tonight.
Well, Billy, it was hard, to follow in the tradition of our great guests, but I was able to pull it off at least one more time, and
I'm surprised to even talk to you.
Well, Billy, I tricked him. I told him you want a prize. You got to call into the show to redeem it. So hopefully we haven't let the cat out of the bag, but it is my pleasure to present to you a cryptozoologist who I've known about him for a while and had a chance to meet him in Point Pleasant last month, and heard his presentation, and been kind of following his writings. He's written for Rue Morgue, and he's a really good writer. I really enjoy reading his stuff. So, without further ado, Lyle Blackburn. Lyle, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. Guys. I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan since I was born and raised here in Dallas, Fort Worth. So I was laughing it up at some of the jokes there. And what about Washington from the Redskins? That is good.
Well, I'll tell you what, Lyle. I was watching that game, and probably when I saw the first drive by Dallas, I knew the game was pretty much over.
Yeah. Well, Dallas, it's never over till the last second. I can't trust them, so I can never watch a game and think that we're, safe and everything's good. So, boy, man, they just they take years off of you if you watch too many of them games, I think.
Yeah, Romo, when he gets under pressure, he you never know what he's going to do.
Yeah, I mean, it keeps it interesting, but you can do things that can throw the whole game, as we know. So, but I'm obligated. It's like being a baseball fan in Boston or something. I'm obligated to be a Dallas Cowboys fan. Living here, my grandfather lived and breathed the Dallas Cowboys and spent years cussing them out from the easy chair. So it was just ingrained in my life. So I'm not a huge football fan, but I it's something you just kind of follow.
Yep. Yeah, that's right.
Well, Lyle, you've done, so when I saw you last, you had a book out, and I think the book's been out for, a year?
Yeah, the Beast of Boggy Creek book. It's been out almost a year and a half now. So,
now, how did you get started into writing about cryptozoology?
Well, it's kind of something that sort of happened. I didn't set out to necessarily start writing in that subject. Just to kind of make a long story short, I was one of those that was fascinated by the subject ever since I was a little kid, and I, saw the Patterson film on TV and, saw documentaries about the Loch Ness Monster and things like that. I mean, early on in the 70s when I was very young, and it always appealed to me because I loved horror movies and stuff, but that stuff, it was possibly real, so it just had something else to it that drew me in. So, I've just been sort of interested in the subject for a long time. I spent a lot of years hunting with my father when I was younger. He was a bow hunter, so I spent years, traipsing through the woods in Texas and even Arkansas, where the legendary Boggy Creek is. And I, just had this love for nature and outdoors and monsters. And so after spending a lot of years playing in a band and touring all over the world and stuff, I really wanted to get back to getting back out into nature, and I just sort of picked up cryptozoology where I left off, but this time I took it and, started doing research. So that mainly started with, a lot of Bigfoot research and just getting out there with different guys. And I don't know, I started writing for Rue Morgue Horror Magazine, and they were real into cryptozoology subjects and knew that I was into it, so they sort of had me covering topics of Bigfoot horror movies or whatever, because, it's entertaining to me. And that led me to think about, well, I've always wanted to write a book, and one of my favorite movies is The Legend of Boggy Creek. It's one of the things that influenced me big time when I was a kid. So I thought, man, it was, billed as a true story, and I just started looking into it and trying to sort out what was true and what wasn't, what was the movie all about, why was that made, and it was fascinating. So I couldn't believe that nobody had written a book on it. Every Bigfooter of a certain age, had seen or was influenced by the Legend of Boggy Creek. So I thought it's a perfect topic, and I just picked up the ball and ran with it, and I kind of just started, researching for myself, but that ended up turning into the book, which has been so well received, and it's just sort of launched me into being the Boggy Creek guy.
Well, I did get a chance to read your book, and I have to say it is very well written. So congratulations on that, and then I'm looking forward, to your next book.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, definitely the response I got just really took me by surprise. Like I said, it was just sort of a book that was special to me and something I wanted to write, for myself, and I wanted to share the information with all the other, Bigfooters out there. And, it's just a bonus when, everybody has complimented me on the writing and enjoyed it. People said, oh, man, I've read that thing like 5 times. I love the book, and, I passed it on to my friends. So it's just great that it worked that way. And, my publisher was obviously happy with that, and it helped me, move forward with writing more books. I thought, well, there's other cases out there I could add something to. So I find myself now, not only a researcher of these subjects, but an author of those books. So.
Well, don't take this the wrong way, Lyle, but, so I read the book, and then when I finally met you, I was like, does this guy really write that book? Because you got this, like rock and roll cowboy type, it's not, and I like to say it's a unique look, but really all you guys from Texas, all you cryptozoologists from Texas, I talked about this Chester Moore, Ken Gerhardt, you guys are, got this rock and roll cowboy cryptozoologist, Ted Nugent thing going for you guys down there. I don't know. Must be something in the water.
I know. It's like we're obligated. We sometimes get criticized for. I've seen some what I think is hilarious criticism of me on the internet that I just run across on Facebook or whatever, where somebody posts a picture, at a panel, and there's Josh Gates and Bill Munns and Jeff Meldrum, and then there's me. People are like, this guy's brooding Bigfoot researcher. I don't dress like a scientist, and I certainly understand, and I make jokes about this. I don't look like a guy who, would be the author of books. I'm not. I just don't look like that. But I've always had a talent for writing, and somehow I can write. And I don't know. I live in Texas, so I just sort of have that rock and roll cowboy thing. But yeah, it's sort of a clash of cultures there, and I guess for better or worse, it makes me stand out.
Well, don't change, because people really can attest to this. People, they kind of jab me because of my fedora wearing habits, and they're like, oh, it's Indiana Jones, but that's who you are,
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's telling you the truth there, Lyle. A lot of times we will key up the Indiana Jones theme song when he comes along.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, you're like the real life Indiana Jones. So I'm looking at it going, I saw you, I'm like, hey, dude, this guy's cool, And of course, I can remember him, on Mothman Festival. There's thousands of people there, but I can, I don't forget the look. So hey, it's working, man. It's.
Hey, Lyle, when he came up to your table, did he have his whip on his side?
Yeah, I think he was actually whipping some of the attendees out there. So yeah, I didn't want to piss them off.
Gotcha.
He looked dangerous.
Well, Lyle, you have to admit, I gave Fred Salugo a good whooping during his presentation, did I not?
Yes, and he could have deserved it. I don't know, but poor Fred. I'm glad I was not Fred.
Fred and I, he's a good guy, and he's a good sport. But we have this thing, we go back and forth, about his interdimensional Bigfoot. And I always kid him about, Bigfoot warping in and out of our dimension, and I really get him going, and it's been, he's been a good sport about it. But he really is a good guy.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, it's cool because you guys have a sense of humor about it, and that's the way I approach it. I'm serious about the topic, but I like to have a good time with it, and everybody's got their own theories about it and stuff, and if you're talking to the average person in the cubicle next to you or wherever you are, to them you just hunt Bigfoot, so
yeah.
You're already treading in waters that most people are, rolling their eyes at. So it's great to have a sense of humor about it, I think, and it's healthy and it keeps people from, some of the, back and forth that goes on. So, I'll just try to keep it fun.
Well, Ted Gerhardt, he's been up here in Massachusetts like once or twice, and he's written about, like the rope, like Thunderbirds in Texas and stuff like that. And yeah. I'll never forget, I saw him at this event up here, and I went up to his table, and I said, "Oh, Ken Gerhardt." And I was looking at his book. I said, "How much do you want for the book?" He was like, $15. I go, $15? I can get this on eBay for about $50. And I was just kidding, I was just joshing him. And then, then he sent me the restraining order, and no, I'm kidding. But he kind of looked at me like, who is this guy anyway?
Well, yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's probably there's some sensitivity because we spend a year or more researching these books, and we put them out. We bust ass to sell them, and then somehow or another, just very little money comes out of it. It's like, it's a love-hate thing with these books because, I love all the, the response and that people read it. And I get to go talk about it, but it's definitely one of those things that, even the publishers go, you never get rich writing Bigfoot books. Well, they also fail to mention I'll probably spend more trying to promote and research the books than I'll make. So yeah, we're all in the same thing.
Oh, well, yeah, and you know what, Lyle? You'll have all the naysayers out there saying, "Oh yeah, he writes these books and he's making a killing." Trust me, me and Bruce know exactly what it is because we're millionaires doing conferences.
Yeah, we're millionaires just wasting away time just until the next conference, I guess.
Right. That must be nice. Man, I got to get in on that.
You know, ironically enough, Lyle, the books, like, so these books that you guys write, you know, they don't, you know, there probably aren't millions of copies of them out there. So you probably, when you sell them, you know, off the shelf, first edition, you know, you're probably not getting a lot for them in terms of, you know, a margin. But what happens is, typically, that in the secondhand market, after they go out of print, that's when they start getting value. I mean, you know, I've seen Roger Patterson's book go for like $80, and it's, you know, it's a little, you know, it's not that much of a book, you know. It's kind of like Doug Waller's book. I hope Doug's not listening. Anyway, you know, these books, you get a lot for them on the secondhand market.
That's true. I'm thinking, like, if I could stash like 100 of them, and then when I'm like 97, I can auction them all on eBay. I'll make a whole bunch of money, but I'll be too old to spend it.
Well, as you recall, I got both your paperback and your hardcover edition, so I think I'm pretty good.
Are you going to read both?
Simultaneously.
Yeah, Billy, I'm going to read both.
Okay.
I mean, and that's the thing. If there was, like, you know, 500,000 people like that, boom, I would be rolling, you know, a high roller. I'd be driving a decked-out Humvee on my research expeditions. But, yeah, I mean, you know, it's it's quality over quantity in this market. But, you know,
well,
I don't say anything. But
yeah.
Somehow I seem to, like, get the idea I'm going to go to the Mothman Festival. It's a 17-hour drive, you know, the gas money and all that. It's like, oh, yeah, I got to pay all the expenses of a hotel room and gas. So, you know, but, hey, it's fun, you know.
You'd be a whole lot better off, Lyle, if you had about 1,000 Bruce Harringtons, you know, buying, 2, 3, 4 books at a time, you'd be doing really good.
That's right. So that's the goal.
But not everybody has Bruce's money, so, you know.
Yeah, but I don't know what you guys are talking about. I blew my inheritance just on Lyle's books.
Oh, man, I feel bad now.
Instead of getting a prime rib, he had to go get a T-bone.
That's right. Oh, man.
You know, if there were 1,000 Bruce Harringtons, the fedora market would be going pretty well as well. So,
yeah, you could like sell your own signature fedora. See, now that's where Gerhard and I should market our own hats. You know, like a line of cryptozoologist hats.
Yep.
You really should.
Black. Yeah. Oh wait, but then like you're in the woods and there's like 5 dudes. You're like, which one of you guys is the real one?
Then you'll have photos. Then you'll have photos coming in with red circles around it. Look, that's Lyle. No, that's a hoax.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like a blurry photo. No, I think that's him, man.
Billy, just think about this. You know, instead of being visited by the men in black, the people are being visited by the men in Blackburn.
Somebody knocks on the door and he's got a black shirt and a black hat. Have you seen a Sasquatch? You better be quiet about that.
Oh, wow.
But seriously, Lyle, you really do have a gift for writing and turning a phrase. And you know, and one of the things I didn't realize. So the Legend of Boggy Creek is, you know, stands out as, you know, in especially people of our age, is one of those horrific movies of our childhood that just leaves that indelible impression. You know, and all these years, I thought that the movie portrayed, you know, factual events, but I didn't realize until reading your book that actually the movie didn't actually portray factual events. It portrayed scenes based on factual events, but the scenes that they portrayed weren't exactly the way it happened. Could you talk a little bit about that? Like for example, the Ford and Taylor, the encounter that they had, the Ford and Taylor families.
Right. I mean, yeah, that's one thing that I ended up doing is kind of going scene by scene and either trying to trace the incident back to a real report through either an interview or a lot of times in the newspaper articles, which were available at the time because everything that was depicted in the movie occurred before 1971, or before 72, basically. But while a lot of people think, the whole thing was just trumped up, but really it's somewhere in between where all the scenes in the movie were based on real reports by real people. There was only a couple of them that I could never find any real basis for. But in particular, if you take the Ford house as an example, and for those that have seen the film, that's the climax scene there where old Bobby Ford jumps through the front door and all that and gets taken to the hospital. I mean, that truly happened, and those folks had moved to town, and the men were away working at night, and the girls were hearing something creeping around on the porch. They kind of got some glimpses of it. They thought, it was some kind of an upright, hairy creature. One night it stuck a paw through the window, and that all culminated in a confrontation on a Saturday night in which the guys had borrowed a shotgun from the landlord. They took out the front door and started shooting at the thing. And then Bobby Ford, the youngest brother, they were out looking at the edge of the woods to see if they could find any evidence that they had shot it. He kind of got scared and headed back to the house. And about then, something ran around from the side of the house, grabs him. He tussles with this thing that he believes to be, a hairy ape-like creature, and then he ends up, kind of crashing through the door. Not like in the movie where he jumps all the way through the door, but essentially busts his hand through the front door, and they did take him down to the Texarkana Hospital. So the way the movie, it's got to be entertainment. There's got to be some build-up. So it restructures that somewhat, but in the basis of it is based on that actual sighting, and that translates to the rest of them as well. The Mary Beth Searcy, the girl at the well, that's pretty much exactly how it went for her. Some of the people that saw it run across the road, that was all just basically what happened. So, I was, amazed and delighted to find out that, the movie wasn't, the movie was made to be a movie, but it wasn't making up things, which was, pretty fascinating. So
the Ford and Taylor family encounter, that was May of 1971. Am I
right?
Or thereabouts, right? And then when I was a kid, the scene that scared the crap out of me wasn't so much the paw coming through the window, but was probably when the woods, the woods encounter where they're going up Highway 71 and the thing runs out across the road in front of them. I remember on the trailer for The Legend of Boggy Creek that was a really scary moment.
Yeah. There's something inherently scary about the headlight shining on the road, and you can only see that thing when it runs through the headlights, and it runs across in front of you, and then it runs into the darkness. And I think that's what makes it so fascinating and scary in the movie. And the woods, they were the second people in 72 to see it. Now, the Fords had moved to town and were renting a house, so a lot of the locals thought, well, maybe they just don't know the difference between a mountain lion and an upright, hairy creature. But the Woods family was very well respected, and when they said they saw, and I quote, a monkey-like creature run across the road down by Boggy Creek, people started really taking notice, and that's what lent some credence to the fact that, well, maybe the Fords did have this thing, you know, and as in 1971, as more and more people were seeing things, and they found the three-toed tracks in June of that year, you know, it sort of built up the case, and all that stuff was getting printed in the Texarkana Gazette, and that's what Charles Pierce, the director of the movie, was seeing. He'd been reading all those accounts, and he thought, well, man, I can make a great movie out of this. I don't even have to make anything up. All I got to do is go down to Fouke and get these people to reenact this stuff, and boom, there's a scary movie, and that's exactly what he did.
Now, the great thing about your book, Lyle, is that, I mean, obviously the events in 1971 sort of touched off the whole Boggy Creek craze, but you also talk about there had actually been hairy man or wild man reports in that area, in the Jonesville area, since the 1800s. So it's not like these, you know, this incident came out of nowhere. There actually had been kind of weird things been reported down in that area previous to that, where there's been a history, right?
Right, and you know, and I thought that's an important thing to look into, because you know, if this thing is being seen at that point, you know, for it to be a real creature and for it to have lived down there, have a population, a viable population, certainly it had to have been seen before. And the way the movie is structured, it is kind of a short timeline, and a lot of the sightings happened in the 60s, and all those started coming forth when the stuff started getting the paper in the 70s. A lot of the old timers were like, hey, you know, we've been seeing this thing for years, and then all those stories came out. So there was some paper trail for that, and then I started going back even further and found sightings in the 1930s and 20s, and then all the way back, like you say, to the wild man sightings in the mid-1800s, which newspaper accounts seem to indicate that people had seen something that today we would call a Bigfoot, but back then they didn't have the term. You know, they didn't even have the term the Fouke Monster. They just called it a wild man. So it was interesting that there was a long history of sightings in this area, which seemed to support the fact that, you know, something could really be behind all this.
Now, Lyle, Bama Buckster in the chat room wanted me to ask you: Did you get all your information for the book from Smokey Crabtree?
No, I didn't. I went to Fouke, you know, countless times over this span of a year and interviewed numerous people. Now, I know Smokey, and I've talked to him several occasions, and you know, his information is somewhat known because he's done lectures, he's written a book about his experience with the Fouke Monster. Even his son's sighting is written about in John Green's Sasquatch, the Apes Among Us, and books like that. So, you know, I knew what Smokey had, and of course that's documented in the book, but what I needed to offer was, let's hear some stuff from all the other people that live down there. I mean, there's 500 residents in Fouke and their extended families, so I was interviewing quite a few people, and some of the instrumental people I interviewed were Wick Roberts. He had owned the Monster Mart down there for years and was sort of a self-appointed historian of these things. He'd grown up in Fouke. There was also a guy, Frank McFerrin, who owns who's the curator of the museum, the Miller County Historical Society. Well, this guy has been another historian, you know, talking to the locals, and he knew a lot of stuff that had never been made public before. So I guess the answer to that is I talked to Smokey and got, you know, his information is in the book, as well as many other people, to build the complete case of the Boggy Creek, you know.
Okay. And then one last question. Let me see where it went here. From Digger Dog, he goes, does Lyle think that the three-toed tracks are real?
Well, I've got a section in the book, and I call that section "The Trouble with Three Toes," and I go into great detail on the different track findings and the puzzle and the complication that whole three-toe track thing adds. There were several times when the locals did find what they believed to be three-toe tracks, so it was certainly something that was a reality. Now, the tracks that are most famous, and they're dramatized in the Legend of Boggy Creek, in which they find the tracks in Willie Smith's freshly plowed bean field. There's a lot of pros and cons about that. So one of the reasons people identify the Fouke Monsters having three toes is because of that particular track line, but I wasn't completely convinced that was real.
Okay.
But I present all of it. I give everybody's side. That's kind of how I write the books. I'm not really out to necessarily prove it. I'm just giving everybody as much information as I can, and you can decide for yourself, or it just adds to the database. So my feeling on the three-toe track is, I'm not convinced that, all southern Sasquatch have three toes. Well, it could, and some of them could have that. I got a guy who took a great five-toe track print in 2004, and this guy had a corresponding sighting. And actually, if you've seen the TV show Monsters and Mysteries in America, they did a Fouke Monster episode that I'm on, and one of the guys, Doyle Holmes, is one of my witnesses. He's got a great five-toe track from right down in the area. So I'm like, well, that sort of throws a wrench in the monkey there, So, I think the jury's still out on the three or five toes.
Yep.
Well, Lyle, the track that was found in Willie Smith's bean field, now that was the one that the other Kennedy discovered. Is that the one that you're talking about?
Yeah, correct. Kennedy was working the field. Willie just owned it.
Now, I remember that part of the, part of the reason why people doubted that was an actual track was because it actually had stepped over the bean plants and not on them, and so it was almost as if people were trying to make a track without wrecking their crop. Am I correct?
Yes, that is definitely one of the red flags. And I spoke to Dave Hall, who was a radio reporter and one of the guys who was there that very day in 1971 when the game warden and the sheriff and everybody came down to investigate those tracks. And his feeling on it was that it looked a little too convenient that the daggum thing never stepped on any of the plants. It walked right through a freshly plowed bean field, and oddly enough, didn't step on plants. Now, on the other side of the coin, Rick Roberts, who was also down there, he said that, he goes, I just don't see how somebody could have walked 150 yards out of those woods and across there. It was a really long stride. It just, it would have taken some doing to hoax that. So if it was a hoax, it was a darn good one. So it kind of kept, it just kept people perplexed, really.
As I recall, that was a 57-inch stride that they measured out. And the track itself was 13.5 by 4.5 inches. I remember looking at the photograph and thinking, it doesn't look like a regular, Bigfoot track that we're used to, like something in the Pacific Northwest. It was really thin, and it almost like, in the picture, it almost looks like two normal footprints sort of superimposed on each other. So where you have the toe impressions of one, and then the heel impressions of the other behind it. So it looks like one long track, but it almost looks like two tracks. But of course.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. It's really odd that it's that long. I'll tell you one thing I did I'm still working on this to get something I can show and present to people, but I actually took that photograph and I blew it up to exact size, and I took some sculpting materials and I built a 3D version of that track. And I'm going to cast some of them so that I can bring them and show them to people. But when you created this track in 3D in real life, you look at it and you just go, dude, I don't see how a 400 or 500 pound, 7 foot tall creature could balance. It's so long and it's so thin. It just seems so bizarre. And that really, to me, just was something that kind of stood out, and I kind of make that conclusion in the book, that it just doesn't seem like solid evidence. But you're right, it almost does look like two tracks together or something. But the picture's in my book, so people can definitely kind of look for themselves.
Now, a question that was asked in the chat room, and you actually talk about in your book quite extensively, is the quote-unquote the skeleton, of which there's been a lot of conjecture about, and you pretty much laid that to rest in your book. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Now, so I know you've seen the skeleton yourself.
Right. Without giving away too much of, I kind of lay that chapter out so that kind of follow me as I discover just what that thing is. But, some people in the Bigfoot community are aware that there was a skeleton found back in the 90s that was, could have possibly been that of a Fouke Monster or Bigfoot. And that came into the hands of Smokey Crabtree, and Smokey was showing that skeleton down there locally in Fouke. And the skeleton, when I saw it, obviously years later, when I saw it, was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. I mean, no matter what it is, when I first saw it, I was just like, what in the hell is this? It stinks to high heaven. It smells like a dead animal. I mean, it's been boxed up in this glass display case. And when you see it, it's truly a bizarre thing, and I think that's one thing that's led to the mystery of the skeleton itself. And there was a lot of rumors and hearsay about what that skeleton was and where it came from. So what I did was trace it back and talk to a sheriff down in Texas where the thing was found. Fouke, Arkansas is only across the border from Texas, so it's real close to Texas. I mean, the woods are contiguous there. The skeleton was actually found in East Texas. I talked to the sheriff who had been involved in the skeleton, which basically some hunters found it in the woods, and the sheriff came down there and was like, oh, geez, well, they were going to have a vet come down there and take that thing away the next morning. But in the meantime, the nephew or something of one of those guys that found it thought, well, maybe this is the Fouke Monster, and they stole the skeleton. So they called Smokey and ended up getting it into his hands. So before the sheriff could ever get it, the thing was gone. But the sheriff ended up tracing the story back and found out where it came from and what it was. And so, it's kind of laid out in the book and as to what that is, although, again, I don't have any DNA proof, and I don't have, I'm just telling you what other people have claimed, and I trust the sheriff. I talked to the sheriff, and which was pretty funny because I call this guy, I finally get a hold of him, and I'm like, hey, man, you remember a skeleton that was found in the woods down there 20 years ago? He's like, yeah. He goes, you don't forget something like that. And so he was kind of taken aback that I was even researching this and writing a book, But he remembered it well, and he kind of filled in the missing gap as to what it is. But again, it's just a bizarre looking skeleton.
And of course, he's retired now, and so that was part of his amazement that anyone would be looking, and part of your amazement that he would actually remember.
Yeah, well, and actually, since I was going to give him a copy of the book, and since it came out, he died. So,
wow.
Yeah, I was lucky to have gotten this guy, and in a lot of the case of this whole Boggy Creek thing, I mean, I'm working against time because, you know, those sightings in the 60s, 70s, I couldn't, you know, a lot of times the people are dead. I actually saw one comment. I don't give very many bad reviews or anything, but I saw somebody in Amazon who complained that I didn't interview any of the Fords. And maybe I didn't say this explicitly in the book, but I you know, I tracked down everybody I could possibly find. I couldn't find the Fords. I mean, and that name is so. Go try to look up Fords. There's a billion of them. I kept almost getting Bobby Ford's number, and somebody knew him, and somebody this, somebody. You know, it always was a dead end. I spent hours looking, you know, tracking down leads, but I never could find him. But luckily I have, even better, I've got, you know, there are folks in the newspaper that were done right then. I got a letter from Elizabeth Ford that she wrote to the Texarkana Gazette that they printed. So I had some documentation that was written at the time, not me trying to interview them 40 years later and getting them to remember. It was written down then. So, you know, luckily I had some of that to work with. But yeah, you know, some of these old cases, you know, I'm racing against time to track down some of the old timers before they die, you know.
Yeah. Now I meant to ask you too. So in the 50s, there was a guy, James Crabtree. Was he any relation to the Lynch / you know, Smokey Crabtree family?
Yeah, he's Smokey's uncle.
Okay.
So, you know, and then back in the 50s, I mean, the Crabtrees, it was a lot of, you'll see these same family names occur over and over in that area because a lot of the original settlers, you know, they just settled there and then their families proliferated. And so, yeah, all the Crabtrees were related basically at one time by marriage or otherwise. James was one of the guys who came forward and said that he had seen something back in the 50s that fit the description of a hairy, upright man-like ape. And, you know, that sort of supported what Lynn Crabtree, which is Smokey's son, said he saw in 1965. You know, and again, I've heard comments or seen comments on the Internet kind of prior to my book that said, you know, that was all made up by the Crabtree family or, you know, whatever. I'm like, well, yeah, several of the Crabtrees saw it, but there was a lot of Crabtrees, and they were in the woods. And as well, there was a whole lot of other people that saw this thing as well. So I think my book is kind of, you know, blows out some of the mythology that it was one family making all this up or any of that nonsense, you know. You know, which was you know, good to be able to share with everybody.
There's a lot of folks out in some parts of West Virginia too where they have the same last name. Isn't that right, Billy?
Yeah, don't talk about my kinfolks like
that. Are you related to the Mothman?
Well, you know, I get teased a lot because of my accent. I grew up down in Southwest Virginia, so I get teased quite a bit about the way I talk. So.
No, I like that accent. That accent reminds me a lot of the accent from the Carolinas, and I just wrote a book on the lizard man from South Carolina. So I've talked to a lot of people on the phone that have that same accent. I like it, and I can identify where they're from by hearing it, you know.
Yeah, and that's sort of that part of Southwest Virginia is all right there within the Tennessee, you know, Tennessee, West Virginia. I mean, you can get to all those areas in like 15 minutes. But it used to be a lot worse than what it is now because I've tried to cityfy my accent a little bit. But when I was younger, this is where I knew that I was, my accent was different. I really never realized it when I was younger. We moved up here, and I went to, I think I was in the 4th grade, and we were having like some type of a pizza party or something in class, and so the teacher was asking all the kids, what's everybody going to bring? And I raised my hand up as high as I could get it. And teacher says, all right, what are you going to bring, Billy? I said, I'm going to bring some Pepsi. And the whole class just cracked up laughing. So, I mean, it used to be really bad. I used to draw my words out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I have an old cassette tape of me as a kid in my, Texas accent. I'm like, man, I sound like my accent is cityfied much, more these days. But man, I sound like a little hick when I was a kid. Man, that's so funny. But you don't realize it because I live here and everybody talks like that. But when I grew up and I've traveled the world, my band has played in places like Slovakia and Poland and all these places. I started becoming more aware of my accent, so I tried to speak more universally so they could understand what I'm saying. As they asked me if you're from Texas, you own horse and ranch. I'm like, no, I don't, but I like horse.
Lyle, Billy also refers to the 4th grade as his senior year. So I don't.
Yeah. All right. Okay, Bruce. Okay.
Oh man, down here in Texas, it was 5th grade was our senior year.
So Lyle, 1971. You've got the Fords and the Taylors. They had their encounter. The D.C. Woods encounter on Highway 71. Then you had the Gloria Jean Ritchie and her encounter. Then you had the Willie Smith Beanfield footprint thing, and then comes Charles Pierce. Do you want to talk a little bit about the Legend of Boggy Creek movie?
Yeah, sure. So like I was saying, basically, at the time, all that stuff's being printed in the Texarkana Gazette. It was even picked up, into other regional newspapers. And Charles Pierce, at the time, was living in Texarkana, and he was running a marketing ad agency, and they were shooting commercials and things like that. He had a lot of experience in film and television. He had played a character called Mayor Chuckles on TV when he was younger. A lot of people in that area remember Pierce as being Mayor Chuckles, So, he was shooting commercials, and I guess that's what kind of gave him the bug to think, well, maybe I could do a movie. And so when he saw this, case present itself in the papers and everybody's freaking out down there, he thought, man, this is perfect. And his first intention was maybe to do a documentary on it, but that kind of turned around and just, became a movie. So what he did was just literally, find a businessman down there that he had been shooting the commercials for and talk him into loaning him some money so he could go get a better camera. And he went down to Fouke and just started, interviewing people. And he got with Smokey and worked out a deal that Smokey would take him into the bayous down there and shoot all that awesome scenery that you see at the beginning of the movie. While you don't see Smokey himself moving very much, Smokey was very much responsible for making it happen as far as all those scenes because, he could take Pierce back in there and they filmed all that. And then they would Pierce would literally go down to the gas station and he would see somebody coming up getting gas and he'd go, oh, that looks like, somebody we could use for this sighting, and they'd go up and say, hey, you want to be in a movie? And they're like, I guess, what do I got to do? Oh, you just got to get out in this field and act like you're scared of the Fouke Monster or whatever. And so he got locals to reenact all these sightings, which made it very authentic. And one reason the movie was so scary at the time, because it comes off as sort of this, it looks like a documentary. It's authentic. The accents are authentic. It looks like real people, because it is. And I remember I saw it in the drive-in in the late 70s at some point when I was a kid, and I remember thinking, in my kid brain, I was thinking, I don't understand how he could be there filming at the same time that person saw the monster, because I thought it was just happening in real time. It's so real looking. And most people came away from it with that. I mean, people were coming out of the movie theater screaming, adults, kids. When it was playing down there in Texarkana, when it debuted, there was lines wrapping around the block. You'd have to bring a sack lunch, because you were going to wait in line so long. You couldn't even get in line. You couldn't even get into the next showing. You'd have to wait 2 showings to get in, because there was so many people wanting to see that movie. I mean, it was just a phenomenon unto itself. And, once it went on the theater circuit and drive-in circuit, that little movie that started out as just a low-budget idea of Charles Pierce ended up making millions of dollars. And, that's a lot harder to do back then than it is these days. I mean, there's a few examples like the Blair Witch Project or Paranormal Activity, in which a very low-budget film got on the theater circuit and made millions of dollars. But when you go back to it, Legend of Boggy Creek was the first one. It influenced the guys from the Blair Witch Project. They were just trying to make their own Legend of Boggy Creek. So the movie is so influential to horror movie people. It's influential to biologists, Bigfooters. It's just a great movie, and it's comes off kind of dated now, and the music's kind of cheesy. But if you watch it and kind of imagine this, going on at the time when it was back in the 70s, it was very effective and just an awesome movie. And even better, it was based on real life. So, all in all, it was just a phenomenon.
Yeah, I remember seeing that movie in the drive-in theater. My mom had taken me, and and you're right, Lyle. I mean, that movie, I think, inspired a lot of people and got a lot of people interested in the whole subject, because that's the first time I learned about Bigfoot was watching that movie. And that movie, it did. As a young child, that movie was scary. But at the same time, you wanted to, when it first comes on and it tells you it's based on, true events and all that, and you're like, you want to learn more about it.
Right. Yeah, and, now I've made it my life's work. So
yep.
It really got me, But, and all that's so cool that, it really did. One reason it had a great effect on me is because not only, was it scary, and I liked monsters, and I liked Bigfoot, but I had been camping in Arkansas and been in the woods. I had driven through countless little towns as my father and I were going hunting, on our way to the lease, and so it just had this extra creepiness, because I knew, the feeling of driving through those small towns, and I thought, oh my God, it was creepy. It kind of creeped me out as it was, and then, old rusted tractors and just, stuff, and then I'm thinking, you're going to add to that a big hairy monster that could potentially run across the road. It just really captured my imagination. So the effect it had on me was huge, and it's cool now to be somehow, contribute to the whole ongoing Legend of Boggy Creek by, putting together all this information in the book and sharing, what's been going on since then down there and everything like that. So it's, in TV shows, I've shot a few TV shows now that have to do with this. which is great. So I'm somehow immersed now into the legend of Boggy Creek, so it's kind of surreal in a way.
Lyle, I remember seeing the poster for the Legend of Boggy Creek, and I don't remember too. I was just a kid back then, but I don't remember too many posters. But two posters stick out in my mind regarding Bigfoot. One was Sasquatch, the Legend of Bigfoot poster, and the other one was the Legend of Boggy Creek poster. Now, the graphic artist who worked on that poster, he was kind of a famous graphic artist, was he not?
Yes, he was, and that was kind of an amazing tidbit that I discovered when I was researching the book, that the guy who painted the Legend of Boggy Creek movie poster is an artist by the name of Ralph McQuarrie. Most people don't know the name Ralph McQuarrie offhand, but they certainly know his work. The guy who originally did the concept art for Star Wars. So when you see Darth Vader, C-3PO, R2-D2, Luke Skywalker, planets, Tatooine, all the planets, he's the guy who drew all that the movie producers used to create the characters. So this guy is amazing. I mean, just look at the effects of Star Wars on modern culture. And I was thinking, wow, this is amazing that he was the guy that painted the Legend of Boggy Creek poster. And in fact, the Legend of Boggy Creek was his first movie poster. He went on to do, he did The Creature from Black Lake, which is another super cool poster, an old 1976 Bigfoot movie. And he did, of course, Boggy Creek 2 and some other posters, like some Battlestar Galactica stuff. But he's very significant, and actually, I have located that original painting. I've been looking for that thing for years now, and I have actually found it. And in less than about 3 weeks, it's going to be mine.
Wow!
I've worked out a deal with the current owner. I actually got to see the painting, and I'm going to buy it so that I may preserve it for
posterity,
history, the posterity of Bigfooters around the world.
Cool.
But,
wow.
Yeah, very cool.
That's awesome. So, the Creature from Black Lake is another classic movie.
Yep.
And I think it was around the same time as the Boggy Creek stuff, but that was directed by McCullough, Jim McCullough.
Right. Yeah, McCullough was involved in that. He's from Shreveport, Louisiana. But Pierce was somewhat involved in that in some degree. What McCullough was basically trying to do was to capitalize on the success or emulate the success of the Legend of Boggy Creek. So Creature from Black Lake, it's set in a southern environment, in this case, Oil City, Louisiana, and it's not a documentary-looking thing like Legend of Boggy Creek. It's just straight up, more a straight-up movie. It's in my opinion one of the better classic Bigfoot movies, but certainly didn't compare with Boggy Creek. But the movie poster is also very cool too. So.
Yeah, that is a cool poster. Charles Pierce, he went on to do Boggy Creek too, but I don't think that ever achieved the same success as the original Legend of Boggy Creek, right?
Right. It's one of those things where you just can't recreate the magic of the Legend of Boggy Creek. There's just no way that could happen. But of course, because it was so successful, the various movie studios had been begging Charles Pierce to do a sequel. Well, he wanted to do other movies, and he was kind of right. He's like, look, I did that, and it was magic, but I'm not going to keep doing that. I'm doing other movies, and moved on. So they hounded him for a while until he finally relented to do one. And I don't think he really wanted to do it, which kind of affects the outcome of the movie. And, by this time it's the mid-'80s, and, things are different, and that it's just not, let's put it this way, that Mystery Science Theater 3000 chose to rib on that movie. So,
I remember that.
Which might be the better, entertaining way to do it. But you can also watch, it's fun to watch Boggy Creek 2 and just act like you're a robot and make your own jokes. Yeah. Man, Charles Pierce is wearing these really short, cut off like Daisy Dukes. I'm like, dude. What was he thinking at that point?
Oh, man.
So,
well, yeah. The interesting thing is, and I think there's actually been more recent sighting reports coming out of that area down there, and I think the two that stand out in my mind were in the 90s. One involved a friend of yours, Brad McAndrews. I think that was like an 89 sighting. That was kind of a scary sighting report. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Lyle?
Yeah, that was a significant report, and what I did in the book is once I, kind of established the storyline of the history of Boggy Creek, I wanted to look into the area as a whole to see if there was continued sightings, and in fact there were, and the sightings, continued in the Fouke area and on into East Texas, where like I said, it's just kind of a contiguous area of forestry there. And one in particular that really stand out to me was by my friend Brad. When he was younger, he lived near Jefferson, Texas, which Jefferson has, been a hotbed for Bigfoot sightings here in Texas over the years. One afternoon he was heading out to look for an area for a picnic, and he was with his grandmother, his mother, and his younger brother. He thought, oh, yeah, I know this field up here, and he kind of darts out ahead and running up there to see if it would be a good place for him to put out the blanket. Well, he gets up there, and it's kind of overgrown, so he's like, okay, yeah, never mind. So he's about to head back when he heard something coming through the woods, like, sounded like an animal running. And he, his first thought was, oh, wow, a deer's running through here, which would be cool. So like any kid would do, he just kind of waited there quietly to see if he could see this deer run across the road. He's on basically a little two-rut trail, basically. And as it's coming, it just sounds like a really big animal. He's like, well, maybe the neighbor is chasing it or something. He's on the trail of this deer. It just sounds big. And lo and behold, all of a sudden this thing emerges from the woods and comes basically to a stop as it gets out on the road. It's next to a fence post. It reaches up, pulls itself up, and stands fully upright. And now this kid is just nearly face to face with a Bigfoot, and he's just sort of transfixed, and so is the creature. I don't think the creature was expecting to see a kid standing there, and he looks at it. It looks at him. For 10 or 15 seconds, he got a really good look at it, and then he hears his brother running up the trail hollering his name, and at that point the creature just, looked at him again and just took off into the woods. He said it moved faster than anything he's ever seen, and when it hit the undergrowth in the woods, it just barreled through like no man could ever do. You just can't run through the woods, especially at springtime. It's very thick, Well, his brother comes up, and he goes on goes about his life, I guess. And since then, this young man has grown up to become a biologist. He's a successful college graduate career guy. But this has always haunted him. So he has spent countless hours and a lot of money trying to, research Bigfoot and to prove that it's real, because it's something he saw as a kid, and it affected him so much. So I being that I know this guy, it's not just somebody I called on the phone. I put more, credibility in that sighting, and he definitely had a very close sighting, one of the closest sightings I've been aware of. So definitely a very, very notable one.
And this individual would have no reason to make up stories or exaggerate, Lyle?
No, I don't think so. I mean, he's the kind of guy that just, he doesn't make up other kinds of stories. He's not that, he's not that kind of person. He's kind of low key, and he just wouldn't seem like he would get anything out of this, especially when you factor in, several years of a lot of money and effort in trying to prove these things. And I've heard him tell the story to several people, and it never changes. He doesn't add to it. It's just the story he is. And this is one person that I really, we have to put some faith in this, because we're not, in any report where we're getting an eyewitness telling you what they saw, you got to put a little bit of faith. I mean, because but there is no ultimate proof. But as far as it goes, this is way up on my meter of credibility with this guy.
Wow. Interesting stuff. And what about I think it was 92? There was a pretty, speaking of, credible sightings, there was a pretty substantial sighting that involved 5 or 6 people, and it was a truck driver. Do you remember that? Do you remember that one?
Yeah. There was a couple of sightings right around the early 90s. In one case, 5 people at once saw it. In one case, 6 people at once, which is very significant. And the one you're talking about, it was about 11 p.m. at night, and there was a carload of 5 guys going one direction, and a truck driver and a truck coming the other direction. And they're driving on this road, County Road 134, which I'm very familiar with in Fouke. Even today, it's kind of desolate out there, and it sits near a place called McKinney Bayou. But as the headlights kind of converge together, they see this thing walk up into the middle of the road. It's standing upright. They sort of see the silhouette, and at first they're thinking, it's a man. What the hell is he doing out here walking across the road? But as they got closer, they could see that it was just much too bulky and burly, and it was covered in hair. You got headlights coming from both ways, so you're kind of getting a silhouette effect on this thing. But they were quite certain that it wasn't, wasn't a man. It certainly wasn't a bear or any panther or any other animal. It was definitely walking totally upright, and it just kind of strolls out, walks across the road, and then just heads off into this dark field. So all the cars come up and they stop, they get out, and they tried to see if they could see it, but it had disappeared off into that dark field. They never saw it again. Well, the truck driver, he's like, what the hell was that? And these guys, there was 5 of them in the other car, they were all from the area. So by 1990, everybody knows the Fouke Monster and Legend of Boggy Creek. Obviously, it's kind of in the back of your mind if you live there. Well, they're like, man, I think we just saw the Fouke Monster, and Legend of Boggy Creek. And the truck driver's like, well, I guess this is the only guy who didn't see the Legend of Boggy Creek, because he had no idea what they're talking about. So they explained what it was. Of course, this guy's like, forget it, dude. I'm out of here. I'm taking a different route. So he jumped back in the truck and took off. Well, I was able to, he was just like, I don't know what kind of creature you got down here in Fouke, Arkansas, but I'm not having none of it. He left. But out of the other 5 guys, I got to interview 2 of them from my book, which was great, because a lot of times you don't get to interview 2 people, from one sighting, So, again, that was pretty significant, and these guys' story matched up. They didn't seem like they were trying to hose me over on anything. They were a little bit reluctant to tell. I said, well, look, I'm not gonna, I'm taking it seriously. I'm not making fun of you or nothing. Their families, they've gotten a lot of, flack for this sighting over the years, but they just said, hey man, that's what we saw. I'm telling you. So to me, it was another pretty good sighting. And so, like I said, there was another sighting on the heels of that, in which about 5 people, which were in 3 different cars, converged and stopped on the side of the road, and were basically sitting there watching this creature stand at the edge of the woods. And for whatever reason, it was just standing there. And it was described like the Fouke Monster, 6 or 7 feet tall, covered in hair, standing upright, stood there for several minutes before it just turned around and walked off into the woods. And, this was, that one was actually investigated by Smokey, and he felt that those people were on the level, and some of them, he knew from Fouke. A lot of times in these cases, you got people who, are very skeptical of it. They've grown up there. They've heard it all their life, like, whatever, Fouke Monster. Well, there were several cases where I talked to people that had that kind of attitude and then ended up seeing this thing. And then, of course, now it changes your whole perception and your whole world. And they're like, yeah, I thought it was all bunk, but then I saw it. I saw what I saw. So I feel certain that, while we can't prove what these people saw, they definitely saw something,
Wow. Well, you've been there a number of times, Lyle. I mean, that whole area is kind of creepy, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely. I mean, there's a lot of heavily wooded areas across the U.S., but there's some places I go that, maybe I've built it up in my mind, I don't know, but they just resonate with a certain eeriness, and that's one place that is like that. It's just, it's still, to this day, where Fouke sits, it's still, within access to a lot of heavily wooded areas. It sits near the Sulphur River bottoms, and all that area back in there is just rugged, remote, and swampy backwoods. You just can't develop a lot of it. There's not a lot of people that can get around it through there very easily. And I've done a lot of canoe trips through Mercer Bayou, which is located right there, and I like to do a lot of Bigfoot research where I can get on water, because I can move very quietly, and you can cover a lot of ground, and you're on the edge of water where conceivably, a creature would need to access. So, whenever possible, I like to get in these canoes. But, we're down there at night. There's alligators. You see those eyes all there staring at you. It's definitely a creepy place, and it's so thick down there that, and I make this remark in the book, you're driving through these little communities out there, it's so thick at most of the time, if there was something standing 10 feet off the road, you couldn't see it. I mean, it could be, it could be anything there, because beyond about 10 feet, your visibility drops, and people who, them city folks with them nice accents, they don't, they haven't been in the woods so much that they may say, they're, where can these things hide? But if you get out there and you get out in the middle of these woods, you quickly realize there's plenty of places to hide and be elusive, especially if you are so inclined to do, or, you're a creature like this that can have the skills to do it. And, it's a totally different perspective when you're down there. It's definitely spooky.
Well, I'd rather be on the water as well, Lyle, because I can paddle a lot faster than I can run.
I don't know. Sometimes I heard Bruce can run on water. So,
you know, I don't mind the creepiness so much as I'm not a big fan of snakes and alligators, Lyle. So those are two things that I kind of don't want to see at night. You know.
Yeah, those are. You know, usually those gators are pretty docile, but I was up there several months ago, and this is the first time this has happened. We were canoeing down. We could see some of those alligators, and they'll kind of go down under the water, and you just go right past them. But you know, all of a sudden, within 2 feet of the canoe, this big, huge gator just kind of rolls over, and it rocked the canoe, and you know, that was the first time that I realized, man, if that thing just wanted to hit this canoe, it knocked me right in that water. And, yeah, I mean, without Bruce's powers of walking on the water, I'm doomed. Or using the magic fedora to float to safety, I'm dead. my hat's leather, that sucker's sinking, right? It's like a dead weight. I'm doomed.
He takes the whip off his side and uses it like a propeller.
I got to take you out there with us, man. That could be kind of handy.
Well, hey, you know,
he would have no problem.
Say the word.
He would just whip, put that whip around the gator's mouth and just, tie it right up.
Yeah. Them gator boys, they use that duct tape. Forget that. We use whips.
Julie, do you have any questions for Lyle?
No, I think I enjoyed all the stories here about the book, and I like the fact that you went and did all the heavy research, and and got to talk to a lot of the people that were involved. I think it's great. Instead of going to one floor, you kind of spread out and you got the story from everybody, and I think that was great.
Yeah, and I try to do that. I think that's what I can offer. I mean, you look at, cryptozoology books and stuff, and, a lot of it's rehashing some of the old stuff. And I've seen books that look like they were written from Wikipedia, and I wanted to make mine a little bit more of a hands-on. I want to go there, describe the place, get the photos, and whenever possible, talk to the actual people, and give people a real sense. I mean, I had a great compliment on the book when I was doing a horror convention in Toronto, and I was signing books and whatever, and a guy from Toronto came up and he said, "Man, I love your book." When I was reading it, it put me right there on Boggy Creek. He goes, "I could envision it perfectly." I said, "Dude, that's what I wanted to do, and I cannot write that kind of a book unless I go there, and I go there and go to these areas, and spend some time." So that's, that's what I tried to do there, and I, with the new book I have coming out, The Lizard Man, the true story of the Bishopville Monster, I did the same thing. I went to South Carolina, and I got out there and I interviewed, as many people as I could. Got with the sheriff. I went to Skateboard Swamp. Put my feet on the ground and did the research. And I think, in that book, it also is going to come out, as something that you're not going to get from just any cryptozoology book. I try to put you there and bring you along as I go out and, try to get to the truth of these cases,
Well, anyone who reads your book, Lyle, the book, The Beast of Boggy Creek, I mean, it's pretty clear that you put a lot of work into it. In the back of the book, you have a timeline of the sighting, accounts that have happened down in that area. But then you also go scene by scene through the movie, The Legend of Boggy Creek, and you talk about, the scene, and then you reference, what goes on in the scene and, the real life event that took place. And another thing I like about your book, Lyle, is that you include a map, which I've referred to many times, because a lot of times in the sighting reports, the sighting accounts that you write about, you talk about, in along Highway 71 where it crosses the Sulphur River, and I actually refer to that map, and it's a great resource to have in a book. And I don't know why more people who write about sighting accounts don't include maps of the area in their books, because it's invaluable to people who've never been there before.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I took a lot of time to draw up that map, and because it's funny because I kind of got, I don't know if I got the idea, but I remember reading Lord of the Rings when I was a kid. I remember referring back to the map constantly. Just like you're saying, I thought, how can I tell this story about a place somebody's probably not been without having a map? So I definitely, one of the first things I do when I start the book is to draw myself a map, and then it kind of gives me my own reference as well, so that I can get to know the area. And so, I think that's helpful, and I like to provide that.
So the title of the book is called The Beast of Boggy Creek. It's just full of information. It's we've only scratched the surface, really, of what's in this book. So I highly recommend it. And I said before, Lyle's just a great writer. And when you read the book, parts of it are funny. Just the way Lyle is able to turn a phrase is kind of funny. But the book is, it's once you start reading it, you sort of can't put it down, because it just reads really quickly. So highly recommend it. Lyle, how can people get this book?
The best way you can find my stuff is to visit my website at lyleblackburn.com. You can also learn more about the Fouke Monster in Boggy Creek by going to Fouke Monster, Fouke monster.net. Either place, there's links to buy the book, which is available. You can get signed copies from me on my Fouke Monster site, or, of course, it's available from Amazon. It's in digital format, Kindle, Nook. It's on BarnesandNoble.com. Pretty easy to find. So you can just hit up my website. You can just sort of navigate the links to get the book in your personal flavor. I might also mention that, and I think this is I'm able to say this now because I saw this on Barrickman's blog, but the season debut of Finding Bigfoot is going to be an Arkansas episode, and they are going to visit Boggy Creek. And so when you visit Boggy Creek and you need somebody to guide you around, who do you call? I guess that's me. So you'll see me in some fashion or form on Finding Bigfoot. So we'll see how I come across on that. But that's coming up here on November the 10th, I believe, on that season debut. So, but it was great. Again, it's great that they came to Boggy Creek and they wanted to, do a little tribute to the legend of Boggy Creek. And I think it's going to be a real fun episode, and a lot of places they go don't have a big movie associated with it, so it's kind of cool. And I think they got permission to show clips of some of the movie. So I'm looking forward to seeing it. So
very good.
That should be a good time.
Yep.
Yeah. And
all right.
My new book, The Lizard Man, comes out on Halloween, so people better get that Beast of Boggy Creek and read it quick, because then you got to buy the second one. So.
Yeah, and you could get. I don't know, Lyle, I can't remember. Did you mention that you'll autograph it for people? And you'll autograph your real name, unlike my copy, which you signed as Bill Clinton.
Yeah, but that's going to be worth way more on eBay later, dude. That's right. Yeah, if you buy them off the Fouke Monster site, I do autograph those, so you would get autographed. Whereas if you buy it on Amazon, I don't know who's going to autograph that, so beware.
Nobody.
But either way, pick it up, whatever is your chosen shopping spot. So, but I appreciate you guys plugging the book and all the compliments. That really makes all the work worthwhile. It's great that it's enjoyed by everyone.
Yep.
Absolutely. So, Lyle, thanks for coming on the show.
You bet, man. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of laughs.
We definitely appreciate you taking the time out of your night to be with us. So thanks, say thank you to your family as well.
You bet.
Yeah.
Good.
All righty, Bruce. Looks like we've wrapped up another one.
This ran a little late, but it was a pretty fun show, Billy.
Yep, it sure was. We actually went over a little time this time, so the last minute or so they'll have to catch on the archive, which is just you and I talking and making fools of ourselves, so it don't matter.
Well, I think we did that over the first 90 minutes of the show, Billy.
Well, yeah, we probably did. All right. Well, it was fun. I'm glad he could come on, and it was great listening to some of the real life, interviews and stuff. Now we'll have to get the book. So, of course, I can always get.
Is great, Billy.
I can always get one of your copies.
Yeah, signed by Bill Clinton.
All right, well, I guess we'll be back next week. I'm trying to remember what we got on the schedule next week.
So next week, Billy, is, if I remember correctly, next week is Bill Munns.
I think you're right. I think we do have Bill Munns on next Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. And we'll talk to him and see what's going on in his life.
That should be interesting as well. Bill Munns was like a special effects guy, got involved with the Patterson-Gimlin event, I'll call it. But I don't want to give too much away, so we'll save it for next Tuesday. Yep,
that's what I'm thinking as well. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in tonight. We appreciate each and every one of you, and we will see you next Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Sasquatch Watch Radio. Remember to join us again next Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. We appreciate every one of our listeners. Thank you so much for being here.